absolutely had to go through the process of figuring out, because I too probably wasn't so confident about myself and what I brought to the table. One of the things that I had to understand was myself first. You know, you have to be in a place internally to be comfortable actually to self-promote yourself.
Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another conversation about another interesting topic that we each need to get just right. What is Goldilocks telling us? Goldilocks, the inner child in us, is telling us how we innately have the ability to get things just right. How do we show up to every situation in a way that we're not too hard, not too soft? We're not too hot, not too cold. How do we show up just right so that every scenario, every circumstances is working for us in a way that we are building ourselves up, but building everybody else around us? Our inner child doesn't think of it as win or lose. The inner child looks at it as how can we all have fun? How can this be playful, impactful, meaningful? And let's all do it together. And if we can tap into that inner child and tap into that inner Goldilocks, we can amaze ourselves and those around us in easily figuring out how to do things just right, because we know this. We know this inherently, and social conditioning has somehow pushed it all out of our accessible mindset right now. And we are going to talk about how to get it just right. And today, to have this conversation with me is somebody I met professionally, and I am getting to build a great relationship with her. And you are going to be blown away by what Pam Johansen has to say. Pam, welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks. And I cannot wait to talk about the importance of building professional resiliency and the toolkit people need to make it happen.
Great. Thank you, Kaz, and thank you for everyone that's joining this conversation today. I'm very excited about talking specifically about this topic because it's really near and dear to me. And so hopefully over this time today and in the future, we'll continue to talk about how you can really take what's inside you and really move it outside. So Kaz, again, excited to be here.
I am super excited, and a secret that we are sharing, Pam and I are sharing with our audience out there, is this: while this is a Goldilocks episode, this is a kickoff to something Pam and I are going to do together for the foreseeable future, because we see, as the world is changing, as the economy is changing, technology is driving unintended change, and our world is in a collision course. We need to have the kind of support and conversation. And so we are going to continue to build on this. And how do we integrate your professional resiliency and your economic resiliency, and how they come together so that you can build the life that behooves you and your family? And as we get started, Pam, you and I have been in the workforce long enough, and we've been through so much change and transformation. There is such an important aspect of professional resiliency that is tied to our own thinking, how we think about ourselves, how we identify ourselves, and how we talk about ourselves. Talk to us a little bit about how that idea of self-promotion, self-worth, self-identity all come together at the foundation of building the professional resiliency.
That's like a big question, and there's a lot of different pieces to this. So I'm absolutely going to kind of talk about also what it means, for me as well. One of the things that's important about self-promotion is that, you have to be in a place internally to be comfortable actually to self-promote yourself. And it's an issue. You and I've talked about this, Kaz, is that there's so many different ways to look at this. There's books, there's, tech talks, there's so many different things that kind of help do this. And that depending upon who you are as a person, like I'm a bit of an introvert, honestly. And when I think about self-promotion, and I think self-promotion also becomes something that when you work in the corporate world, they're always talking about how you need to talk about yourself, talk about the things that you know are doing or nobody knows. And so that's kind of one of the things too that we're going to kind of double click on is the fact is how do you do it? But to be really successful, and that's both within the workforce and outside of the workforce, this is the way upon which you can help yourself also understanding that the value you bring to the table, because that's one of the exercises you have to do to be able to self-promote. So hopefully that answers your question. But for me personally, I absolutely had to go through the process of figuring out because I too probably wasn't so confident about myself and what I brought to the table. And so there were some things that I had to do to get to self-promotion and to feel good about what I did and really show the value that I really provided.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Pam. One of the things I observe, I come from the East, so we are raised and wired a little differently. And when we think about ourselves, we don't think about ourselves in terms of what we do. We think about ourselves in terms of who we are.
Mhm.
And when we show up as who we are, then what we do falls into place. And when we talk about who we talk about truly who we are as humans. And then talking about what we do doesn't seem that personal. And when what we do changes, doesn't take away from who we are. Talk to us a little bit about the risk of putting our entire identity on a job of what we do. And when that what we do is changed or taken away, or we're pushed out of it, the devastation it causes, and therefore we become paralyzed in a way that we can't even talk about ourselves, let alone self-promote.
It's interesting, just that question that you ask. It kind of reminds me, there are a lot of studies that are out there as it relates to women and be trying to even, self-promote because most women really don't want to talk about themselves. I don't want to talk about myself or my abilities. And so the one thing that's important is that, I'm going to talk about the workforce for one is that women tend to be judged, and this is a study, y'all, more harshly than men when we do self-promoting. And the interesting part about it, it's usually women judging other women. And so that was kind of an interesting thing because, one of the things that we as women do is that we think of ourselves as, we were conditioned from early on about being a good girl. And it tends to, we never want to do anything that makes it appear like we're full of ourselves. And so that's why just what I just shared, if you're out there, you're saying something, you're trying to talk about yourself and you're already feeling comfortable about it because it comes off bragging, being arrogant, you also have another force that's out there that can be women, other women can really challenge you with that. And actually it's far less than men. So again, that's really important to understand is that that is happening in the workforce, but yet you still have to get to a place and you're going to have to not think about what's being said to feel comfortable to help self-promote. And again, that's in the workplace. And to your point, Kaz, it could be even just yourself in your personal life as well, because there's some really great things you do in your personal life as well. It just isn't all about work.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important point. A lot of times women reach out to me, my students, especially after maternity leave, they come back to get their MBA so that they can go back to work. And they always say, I haven't done anything. I don't know what to put on my resume. And I always
Mhm.
have a conversation with them about, you know what? do you stop to think about running a household and raising a family is like being a CEO, CFO, and COO and CHRO all rolled into one? Think
Mhm.
about the things you do and the human skills it develops and the transferability to the workplace. A lot of times we think about things very narrowly and we are
Mhm.
negatively judgmental, and our self-talk becomes our
Mhm.
perception of ourselves, and therefore we can't talk. So what I recommend to my students is think about scenarios and then tell stories, and then from the
Mhm.
story connect to the workplace capability that brings.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about how women can do this and how men can help women do this, and male allyship for women and the mentoring of men and women. All of these have a place in the workplace.
So let me kind of talk a minute about first yourself. And again, I'll just kind of share a little bit is that when I kind of went down this path of self-promotion and everything, one of the things that I had to understand was myself first. And I needed to take the time to truly, and one of my recommendations is to others or other women when they talk to me, is that sit down and just start writing down everything that you are proud of. Proud of it could be, hey, your children. Proud of it could be something at your work. But most importantly, take the time to write it down and take the time to think back in your past as well, because it isn't just always about what happened in the last year or so. What that did for me was it helped me feel like, my gosh, I had done a lot more than I had ever thought. And that also gave me the opportunity to think about and take the time to say how proud I was of that. The important part is that as you bring that information and you are now really, you're getting more confident about yourself and what you bring to the table, make sure that you're sharing that. There may be people that may not be so pumped up about hearing you say those things, but most importantly, be willing and confident. Now you ask, how can men help? Men should actually be our supporters. I think that having open conversations about specifically in the workforce about what you have done and positioning in a way where you are humble and not bragging, but you have your story and your story is important. And so they will understand and they will then become advocates for you. So hopefully that kind of answers that
Mhm.
question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are a lot of good male allies we can find in society and in workplace. And the same way job changes and transitions and downsizing affects men just as harsh.
Mhm.
Men, their entire self-worth and their ability to provide for the family has been predicated on the job. And when the job is taken away through downsizing or some kind of a transformation, men don't have a place to turn. They have no network or a awareness of how to have this conversation. And they go into depression, they get into mental health spirals, and I've watched this happen. What advice would you have for men? Because women at least have the ability to talk to their sisterhood community, even if it's not their work at in our personal lives. Men don't have that. Men don't talk about those things to each other.
So let me kind of tell, and it can be both male and female, but let me kind of speak how that really is relevant to males, is that, one thing you should do is that, and again, I'm going to use an example. On LinkedIn, obviously you're probably LinkedIn, and this is important, but there are people that were probably in your past jobs, in your church, maybe it's your neighbor, that you should feel like you should do an outreach, because I think sometimes men sell other men short in what they should go off and have a conversation about, because men could be real macho and they don't want to have that conversation. But I really say do an outreach. And I think what's really important about that is that by extending, talking to the people who you used to work with, talking to those that are your neighbors, but also express the fact that you are potentially out of work, because you know what? Jobs are found through connection. And those connections and conversations about talking will absolutely potentially help you lead to either having a greater base of friends or connections, let's put it that way. And who knows, it might lead you to your next opportunity.
Very
So,
so, very much so, Robin. Pam, so as we think about this, Pam,
mhm,
and talk about self-promotion, what are some of the things individuals can do,
mhm.
and how can they go about self-promotion?
So there's probably a list of things that we'll
Mhm.
get to talk about in the future. But
Yeah.
let me just kind of let me take you back to my example of um, framing your achievements. You know, one of the things that we talk about, and even, you know, today, and you just talked about this earlier in our call, there are organizations that are letting people go, right? That's just, you know, part of what's going on, which is really unfortunate. But this is where your opportunity plays in, where you should be taking your achievements. And where's the very first place it happens? It happens on your resume. As an example, this is where you need to take the time and write down everything and highlight, because finding a job today is very different. And this is where you can really start showing. And I'm going to use the word silently showing is your resume. When you start writing down, you know, here's what you've done, tell your story in that, show your achievements in an outcome kind of way. But you also should be having a LinkedIn profile, and that you can obviously exploit with lots of different information, the projects that you did, the awards maybe you won, the activities that you did. But the thing that's important in all of that is that, and we kind of refer to this, what is your story that brings and shows the value of who you are that you bring to the table? Both of those exercises, let me tell you, are hard because you've got to really think this through. But that also helps set your value. And then most importantly, it helps tell, you know, this is one of the things that I did was I sat down and started, what is my value system? What is most important to me? And that's kind of, it's therapeutic. So what do? Get your resume going, or write down your achievements, update your job profiles, or your profile on LinkedIn, but really ingrain in yourself who you are and what you bring to the table, because that actually does help increase your confidence. And then be prepared to tell your story. Tell your story just to practice, tell your story when you're interviewing, tell your story to others. Feel comfortable.
Mhm. I love the tell your story part, Pam, because telling the story can be very much like telling a story. And therefore, you don't have to feel like I'm talking about me. I'm telling a story. I'm narrating a scenario. I'm narrating how something unfolded and what I learned from it and how it helped me become the person I am today.
Mhm.
That is far more powerful than listing out, right? So I
Mm.
love, absolutely love that telling your story part. Now, what are some of the concerns or fears you had when you made this transition from an introvert to be able to do this? Because other people are going to have similar kind of fears.
Yep. Um, so let me kind of tell you a little bit of a story that I did, because you know, I too obviously wasn't comfortable self-promoting myself. And you know, I was finding myself in my work organization where my organization I was in, you know, there wasn't a lot of feedback, but all the other people I worked around were giving me kudos and positives and everything, which was wonderful. So one of the things that also happened is that I got quite a few awards in an industry I was in. I really got some negative feedback from my management about that. And it was interesting because that really changed my confidence level. It really kind of degraded my confidence. What I said, I brought it before, is that when I started laying out all the things that I did and how my job grew over time as well, is that this is where my opportunity came in to change my confidence. I had to really teach myself is that, you know, when you do things, there are people that are probably envious, and that sometimes you have to get okay about the fact that that's what's going to happen, but do not let that change who you are. Don't lose your confidence. Just keep moving forward. So that's just a little bit of a story that happened to me. And what saved me personally was the fact that when I really started writing things down, the reality was really coming very, very clear to me that, I brought clear value to the table, that I absolutely had something that was important, and that what other people said, I couldn't help that, but I can't let it hinder me either or define me. So that kind of gives you an example. I'm being a little transparent and authentic about how this played out for me. And that really changed how, from being an introvert to being an extrovert, but feeling comfortable with what I said.
Mhm. And I hear you about how even introverts can show up as extroverts,
Mhm.
because I grew up as a very introverted child,
Mm.
but circumstances necessitated, as the oldest daughter raising siblings away from home in foreign countries, I had to step up. So I
Mhm.
had to learn, how do I keep technically, as an introvert, we draw our energy and recharge in private.
Mhm.
We don't recharge in
Right.
public, surrounded by people. So I needed to figure out, how do I carve out my time to
Mhm.
recharge, replenish, and fill my cup by myself, but at the same time, be out there socially engaging. Because if I don't engage and I don't build relationships, my whole family doesn't get to move forward, right? So it was
Mhm.
out of necessity I mastered it,
Mhm.
but I'm glad I did, because today professionally it helps me. So I'm glad you brought that up, because introverts don't have to remain quiet.
Mhm.
Introverts need to know what it means to be an introvert, and then hold that sacrosanct, and then show up in social situations the way it's going to serve them and their cause the best. Talk to us a little bit about the power it gives you when you can bifurcate that.
So, for me personally, the power that comes from that, and I want to kind of drop back to what you're saying. As an introvert, I am exhausted by talking all day long. And so, but having said that, what it does is that I now am in, I can obviously do that, but I also know what I have to stop doing at the end of the day so I can obviously recharge. But what does it and how does it make me feel? It really changes the dynamic of who I am, what I am, the confidence that I am, and how I can now speak about what I do. Now, let's be clear, it's not always easy. It takes time, and you have to take the time to learn and feel comfortable. And also test. I always like to say this, test it. Just go out there and tell as I said, your story or whatever the example of your value is, just test it. But know that you still provide value no matter what. And the recipient may not see it that way, or they might this is the other thing too, is that sometimes when you share, what you think someone might think of you for saying that is completely different than how they're receiving it. Because they might receive it like, oh, wow, you know what I mean? This particular person did this. I didn't know this. So for me personally, it is a real confidence boost when I can share those things as to what I've done.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to hear you say that. Pam, it's funny how time flies when we are
Mhm.
having fun and a
Yes.
really meaningful conversation. Before we go any further, as we prepare to wrap this up, I want you to do two things. One, share with our audience how best they can get a hold of you, and one nugget of wisdom you want to leave them with until we regroup with them with our ongoing program.
So first off, to get in contact with me, my LinkedIn profile is Pam_Johansen. Check me out. But my email address is Pam_Johansen@comcast.net. Would love to hear from you. My nugget is, as I said before, your activity. Before we see each other again, take the time, start writing down all those achievements and read them, tell your story, and come back and learn more about how you can take that story to the next level. So looking forward to coming back around again.
Thank you so much, Pam. I am so looking forward to building on this. Thank you so much for coming today to talk to our Goldilocks community and get the setup done, because we are at a time and place and space where every adult and young adult need to start thinking about, how do I build my professional resiliency and connect it to my economic resiliency, and how the two come together is going to set the stage for how I live my life and what I do with my life. And I cannot wait for us to bring this to our audience on a regular basis. And this is not just going to be us sharing insights with them, but they are going to engage with us, and we're going to help each of them build what they need to build for themselves. And we're going to do this together, separately, whatever folks need. And to me, that is the most beautiful thing we are embarking on. So thank you very much for joining me on this journey. I am excited to co-create this journey with you, Pam, and to our audience.
True.
Please, as you listen to this, start thinking about, what does support, help, and empowerment for you look like? It doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, whether you're at the middle of your career, end of your career with your second act coming up, or a young person just getting ready to start. We all need this. Start thinking about this, keep an eye on this space, and we definitely look forward to bringing solutions to you and working with you so that you can formulate the solution that is going to be just right for you.